Thank you. That was lovely. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Arlington in gathering and online service. I am Chris Johnson, and I am honored to serve on UUCA's Board of Trustees and as Treasurer. I'm so happy that you're here to join us this morning. We strive and are dedicated to be an inclusive community of differing abilities and disabilities, both seen and unseen, many genders and sexual identities, a community of diverse cultural, racial, and class backgrounds. Whether you've been coming to UUCA for many years or are new to our community, whether you're in person or joining us online, I hope you feel welcomed and at home. Whomever you may be, we welcome you to our community. Reverend Amanda will be preaching this morning about working against homophobia and heteronormativity as part of our welcoming congregation services. How can we as a congregation and individually avoid assumptions about sexuality and gender and instead bring a spirit of curiosity and celebration to all possible ways we are a rainbow people? We would like to invite you to join us and attend our carnival on Saturday, May 21st, from 6 to 9 p.m. in the church parking lot. It's being run by the youth group and is going to be a lot of fun. Long games, cotton candy, places to sit and catch up together, and at the end of the night, an outdoor dance party. We really want everyone who can attend to support our teens. So again, that's May 21st, 6 to 9 p.m. I invite you to join us after the service this morning for our in-person community coffee hour at the Gallery Center. We ask that you be masked when not drinking coffee or when not eating. You may also join us in Fellowship Hall to chat and catch up. We will also have our virtual coffee hour after the service, the 11:15 service, that is. I hope you can join us so that we can connect and grow and get to know each other better. The Zoom link for the virtual coffee hour can be found in the Connections newsletter or in the email reminder you should have received this morning. If you are new to UUCA and would like to learn more about our community, I invite you to reach out to someone on the ministerial team, Board of Trustees, or someone at the welcome desk in the lobby. We look forward to meeting you. Thank you for joining us this morning, and I hope you will join us for our gathering hour and at our carnival on May 21st.
Chris, thank you so much for that warm welcome, and I can't wait to see folks at the carnival. A reminder that adult volunteers are requested to support our youth and their vision for fabulousness at that carnival, so please sign up. Our opening words this morning come from Mark Bellatini, one of the first two openly gay Unitarian Universalist ministers many years ago. This is called How to Discuss the Truth. How to discuss the truth that some men love men and some women women and some both with the children in the church school and church home? Nonchalantly, without drum rolls, without tiptoe preparations, without calculating and predicting to the nth degree, with candor, with open ears, with unfailing tenderness, with one foot in the realm of God and the other foot on that solid earth made of the ashes of Radcliffe Hall, Auden, Da Vinci, Emma Goldman, Susan B. Anthony, and Mark DeWolf. With real hope in our purpose and thanksgiving in our pulse, with the full iris of our living tradition in the eye, without using the inherited Augustinian scalpel that splits flesh from spirit and pleasure from good, without homilies on toleration, with the words some of us and not the words they and them, with as much heart as intellect, without embarrassment, with stories and examples as wonderful as a tale by Seuss, with rhapsodies on the glories of friendship, with gladness for uncertainties, with joy. As we come together to worship, let us bring indeed hearts of joy, hearts full this morning.
As is our new custom, I light the candle of compassion. Our world is a challenging place to exist in. This morning, I want to lift up 3 different things. The first is we continue to offer love and support to those living through the brutality of war in Ukraine and those who are living through war in other countries around the globe. Secondly, I want to lift up the International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia, and Biphobia. While there has been a continuing growing movement among the LGBTQ community to be heard, to be legitimized, and to be accepted as the diverse and wonderful human beings they are, we all know their struggle continues. The International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia, and Biphobia exists to raise awareness of the realities that exist in the LGBTQ community. This year, May 17th, marks the International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia, and Biphobia. On this day each year, we endeavor to reaffirm the human rights and the fundamental freedoms of all persons, including lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and intersex persons. We also know this: our work to support, love, and affirm these members of our communities is not nearly done. The last thing I want to rise to your attention is an incident that happened yesterday that was devastating. I'm offering the strength and love of this community to the city of Buffalo, New York. Yesterday, an 18-year-old white gunman went into a Tops grocery store in a largely black neighborhood. There he killed 10 people and wounded 3 others. 11 of the shooting victims were black. This shooter drove more than 200 miles to mount his attack. He live-streamed his actions around the globe until that feed could be cut. The horror and the horrible situation were out there for all to see. Our hearts go out to those who were killed, who were maimed, and to the families affected by this tragedy. In particular, our hearts go out to the children who lost parents or relatives. Their lives have been irrevocably changed. With that last sentence in mind, UUCA is going to send a donation to the NAACP in Buffalo, New York, specifically earmarked for the children who were harmed by this event. Let's light our chalice. And one of our faith traditions, as you know, is to light a chalice. We light this chalice as many of our sibling congregations across the country and around the globe light a chalice to start their worship services. We gather together as a community of memory and hope to celebrate life and its infinite possibilities for love. Please add your voices. We light this chalice as a symbol of the light within every human heart. May our individual sparks meet and merge, bringing both light and warmth to our world.
Spirit, and to turn in your teal hymnal to 1053, we'll be singing How Can Anyone?
How could anyone fail?
We have today a very special guest to help us tell our story. So as I get a seat ready for her, I want to invite our children to come up to the chancel and join me here. We are so glad to have Miss Muffy Blake Stevens, Queen of the Capitol, check out the documentary about her, with us to tell our story this morning. So come on up. I'm going to sit and join you so that I can hear this story too.
Good morning.
Miss Muffy, we are so glad you are here this morning. You want to sit down so we can hear the story together?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you, Reverend. This morning's book is going to be From the Stars in the Sky to the Fish in the Sea. Once upon a time, in a little blue house on a hill on the edge of town, a baby was born. They were born when both the moon and the sun were in the sky. So the baby couldn't decide what to be, a boy or a girl, bird or fish, cat or rabbit, tree or star. So the baby looked a little bit strange. All the same, the baby's mother gave her a bath, rocked them in her arms. Your name, she said, is Mulan. She sang a song to her, a song that her mother had sung to her. Whatever you dream of, I believe you can be. From the stars in the sky to the fish in the sea. You can crawl like a crab, feathers fly high, and I'll always be here. I'll be near standing by. And I know that I'll love you till the day that I die. Even though no one could still decide, the baby felt loved. Mulan grew up to be a little strange, magical child who was always changing. They grew feathers and wings to fly with bluebirds in the morning, scales and a tail to swim with the fish in the afternoons, and fur and paws to play with the puppies in the evenings. No matter how many things Mulan became, their mother always brought them back to the same little blue house, gave them a bath, tucked them into bed at night, and the stars rose and she sang, whatever you dream of, I believe you can be. From the stars in the sky to the fish in the sea. And Mulan felt loved. One day it was time for the child to go to school. They were so excited. She grew a peacock feather and a coat of tiger stripes. Have fun, Mulan's mother said. The other students were either boys or girls. They had no feathers, no scales, no leaves, no fur, no fins, not even sparkles. No one invited Mulan to play. One little boy ran up and asked, what are you supposed to be? Mulan didn't know how to answer. When they came home, their mother asked them, so how did you like school today? It was okay. Didn't you make friends? Not really. That night, Mulan's mother tucked them into bed and sang, you can crawl like a crab or with feathers fly high, and I'll always be here. I'll be near standing by. And you know that I'll love you till the day that I die. And with that, Mulan felt loved. The next day, They were a turtle shell and a porcupine's spines. No one pulled or poked at Mulan, but other children still poked and whispered. "Did you make friends today?" asked their mother. "Not really," said Mulan. That night, Mulan's mother tucked them into bed and sang, "Whatever you dream of, I believe you can be, from the stars in the sky to the fish in the sea." And Mulan felt loved, though still somewhat sad. The next day, Mulan wore no feathers, no scales, no leaves, no fur, no fins, no shells, no spines, not even any sparkles. Mulan was invited to play baseball with boys. No one pointed, whispered, laughed, or stared, but when Mulan joined the little girls playing hopscotch, "Boys don't play hopscotch," said a little girl. "Are you a boy or a girl anyway?" asked a little boy. "Didn't you have a shell the other day?" asked a girl. "And feathers the day before?" "What are you supposed to be?" said several children to her at once. "I don't know," Mulan shouted, and galloped out of the playground on horse's hooves, swam through the tree with a fish's tail, and soared up onto the hill with eagle's wings. Mulan's mother asked, "How was school?" "I wore feathers and stripes. The other kids would think I was beautiful, but they thought I was weird. And I wore a shell and spines so that no one would poke or pull at me. But then they wouldn't talk to me. And then I tried to just be like everyone else. But I haven't made any friends. I can't decide what to be. What do I have to be just to be something they will like?" "It isn't always easy to be different from everyone else," said their mother. "But you can only be who you are." "What if the other children don't like me for who I am?" sniffled Mulan. Their mother smiled sadly. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I do know this." Sorry, this book is getting me.
Not the only one, I bet.
"Whatever you dream of, I believe you can be. From the stars in the sky to those fish in the sea." And once again with her mother, Mulan felt loved. That night, she slept a deep sleep. The next day, Mulan wore fur, feathers, scales, leaves, and many sparkles that glittered like stars. For a moment, none of the other children spoke to him. Then a little girl said, "You can fly? That's so cool." "I like your sparkles," said a little boy. "I'm sorry that I pulled your feathers the other day. I was just jealous of them." Mulan asked, "Doesn't anyone want to play with me?" She showed the other children how to gallop like horses and climb like monkeys and swim like fish. It was fun being many different things. And the child of fur, feathers, scales, leaves, and sparkles, who was neither a boy nor girl, but many things and always changing, felt happy. In the little blue house on that hill, on the edge of town, Mulan's mother smiled and sang her song that her mother had sang to her once upon a time. "Whatever you dream of, I believe you can be. From the stars in the sky to the fish in the sea. You can crawl like a crab, with feathers fly high. And I'll always be here. I'll be near, standing by. And you know that I'll love you till the day that I die." Whatever you dream of, I believe you can be. For you are my child, courageous and free. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Oh, that's your, wait, hang on. That was mine. Here we go. I gave you mine. I hope that all our children know that in this church we think you can be anything you can be, from the stars in the sky to the fish in the sea. And I wonder if we could give Miss Muffy Blake Stevens another appreciation for being with us this morning. Thank you so much. That's beautiful.
I ran it out and made me cry.
We'll sing our children just as they go off. They're off. They're off to classes. Off to classes. Our hearts are full of joy, full of tears, full of gratitude for places where we are seen in our fullness. I want to invite you this morning into a time of prayer and meditation. I want to invite you into a prayer of gratitude for queer community. Center yourself for a moment, if you will. Close your eyes if that's comfortable, or soften your gaze. I invite you in this moment to bring into your heart those members of the queer community who have been life-giving to you. Perhaps they have been models for your own journey of queer identity. Perhaps they have taught you about an experience different than your own. Perhaps they are simply your friend, your mother, your child. I invite you in your heart or aloud to say their names with gratitude for the gifts they have brought. Spirit of life and love, God of many names, we are grateful today. We are grateful for those who are queer and who are out and surrounded by love, who hold their queerness with joy and celebration. We are grateful today for those who are not yet safe to be out. May they be held and protected. May they find love opening paths forward. We are grateful today for the gift of queer community, for the beautiful family, for the rainbow world of which we are a part. Amen.
This morning's reading, selected by Rev. Amanda, is entitled Any Other Questions. It was written by Victoria Safford. People ask me sometimes, is this a gay church? It's a privilege to answer. Ours is absolutely, gladly, hopefully, and humbly, gaily a gay church, a gay tradition, where everyone, including heterosexual members and friends, is welcome. Where everyone is needed, where everyone's experience is cherished as a sacred text, because no one's experience of living or learning can be comprehensive, because each of us holds clues to the other's needs about how to live with dignity and joy as a human person, and none of us knows enough about that yet to be considered whole. It's absolutely a gay church, even as ours is a gay church. If you would look around, gay church, straight church, people's church, a human congregation made holy by the holy hopes and fears and dreams of all who wish to come. We say that. Come in, come out. We're all in this together. I won't speak of tolerance with its courteous clenched teeth and bitter resignation. I will not speak about acceptance or of other people or of some other kind of lifestyle. I can only look in laughing wonder at human life in all its incarnations. I can taste only in passing the breath of spirit of life in my mouth and understand our common longing to breathe in deep, deep gulps of spirit. I cannot think of being anybody else's ally, even because that implies some degree of separation, some degree of safety for some of us. We are allied, and no one, and without nothing but love, the larger love transcending all our understanding. All the different, glorious, various, variant, beautifully deviant aspects of ourselves are bound together on this world in elegant unity. I know that on some sad and disappointing days, these words describe the church that yet shall be, and perhaps not the church that is. I know. But I know too that to answer is an act of creation. To answer this question and some others is a privilege, a prophetic imperative, a joy, a duty, a holy sacrament. People ask me sometimes, is this a gay church? The answer is yes.
Thank you so much to our handbells, our wonderful guest violinist for that beautiful, very special piece of music. This service is part of our Welcoming Congregation series. Some of you were perhaps at the service at the beginning of April when Rev CTC shared that we are in the midst of a recertification as a welcoming congregation to LGBTQ folks. This congregation was one of the early adopters of the Welcoming Congregation designation. We did our work in the early 90s, becoming the first congregation in the Mid-Atlantic to vote to be a welcoming congregation. And that is something to be proud of. And we have a technical need to be recertified with the denomination, and I would argue a need to be recertified in our hearts over and over and over again. There are some ways that you can be involved. I invite you today at 1 p.m. to go to the activity room for the movie screening of Disclosure. And then, of course, Pride Month is right around the corner. There will be events here and elsewhere, and keep an eye on emails and information in our Connections newsletter. I love that we are learning together through this process, that those of us who are queer are perhaps learning alongside those of us who are not queer, since, of course, there are many queer identities, many queer experiences. I love that we will celebrate together in June. Last year during Pride Month, I talked about the importance of queer space. I talked about the difference between being a congregation that saw itself institutionally as an ally to the LGBTQ community, and being a congregation that saw itself, as well as Victoria Safford writes in the reading Rev CTC shared this morning, as a gay church. Now, gay in that reading is being used as a kind of umbrella term. Maybe we might say as a queer church, as a trans church, as a non-binary church, as an asexual church. What would it mean for us to be a church where we don't just welcome, we understand ourselves institutionally to be queer, to be queered? Okay, so let's talk about heteronormativity. Doesn't that sound fun? This morning, we lit a candle of compassion holding in our hearts International Day against homophobia, transphobia, and biphobia. And I suspect that almost every one of us in this room knows what those words mean. Maybe our kids do too. Perhaps like me, you grew up knowing what those words mean and why we work against them. But maybe like me, you hadn't learned about the concept of heteronormativity when you were growing up. Maybe even right now, you aren't quite sure what it is I'm talking about. Wikipedia defines heteronormativity as the concept that heterosexuality is the preferred or normal mode of sexual orientation. It assumes the gender binary, i.e., that there are only two distinct opposite genders, and that sexual and marital relations are most fitting between people of opposite sex. Most fitting. It's a phrase and a half, isn't it? Heteronormativity, the idea that heterosexuality is the norm, the standard. Heteronormativity is why still in our society queer kids have to come out to their parents, because kids are assumed straight until proven otherwise. Heteronormativity is why trans kids and non-binary kids come out to their parents, because kids are presumed cis until proven otherwise. Do we all know what cis means? Let me do just a little lexicon, a little practice. Cis comes from the Latin cis for same, and when we talk about being cisgender, that means that the sex that we were assigned, the gender we were assigned at birth, right? When I was born, the doctor said, surprise, it's a girl. Actually, it wasn't a surprise, but yay, it's a girl. And now here I am, and yeah, sure, girl pretty much fits, so I'm cisgender. Trans comes from the Latin across. We talk about being across gender, and in a little while we're going to talk about the whole gender spectrum and the beautiful possibilities within it. Heteronormativity is 4-year-old Jane holding 4-year-old Billy's hands and their parents gathering around with cameras because it's so cute, just like maybe they'll go to prom one day and we'll be able to show them this picture. But when 4-year-old Jane holds hands with 4-year-old Mary, nobody says the same thing. Heteronormativity shows up sometimes when we are teaching our children about sex, especially those of us that are in different gender relationships. Here at UUCA and in other Unitarian Universalist congregations, we have a comprehensive sexuality education program, OWL, and yet still, some of us may find ourselves stuck. Emily McCombs wrote on Huffington Post a great blog post about her experience teaching her 10-year-old son about sex. She's a good progressive parent, and so she was answering the questions her kid brought her, and her kid was bringing more and more specific questions, so she was answering with more and more specific answers, and she was going into the mechanics, and oh yes, the mechanics of how babies are made, sure, we'll go into that, and answering questions about how sex wasn't just for babies, and making babies, and could be fun too, and then she writes, her son came to her and asked, well, how do two men have sex? And she found herself stopped short. If my son is old enough, she writes, to have gotten a frank explanation of the mechanics of heterosex, why did I feel so uncomfortable giving him the same information about queer sex? Especially considering that the sex acts engaged in by queer people are also performed by straight folks. Somehow, when he asked me about two men together, the same information had just felt instinctually more, well, sexual. I had to look at that discomfort, McCombs writes. How had someone as well-intentioned and liberal, and frankly not even entirely straight as me, fallen into the idea that gay sex is somehow dirtier or less appropriate to talk about than straight sex? I'll tell you how, heteronormativity. Heteronormativity is even sometimes straight folks liking the acceptable part of pride. The two moms with their stroller, or the corporate floats all decked out in rainbow, or PFLAG, and to be clear, I am not knocking PFLAG. Thank God for PFLAG, which I say not flippantly, but religiously. But heteronormativity sometimes means liking those parts of the Pride Parade and then looking away at the dykes on bikes, or the non-binary punk kids, or the kink community. Heteronormativity can mean looking at Pride for the glitter and forgetting that it started as a protest, as a riot, as a black drag queen sex worker saying, no more. You are, I am sure, deeply aware of the laws being pushed forward in our country, state by state, laws that endanger our trans and non-binary kids, laws that endanger the queer community around the country. Most especially, you might be aware of the Don't Say Gay law in Florida, as though not saying the word erases the existence, the reality. Foothills Unitarian Universalist Church in Foothills, Colorado, has responded to that law and to the messages in their own community in Colorado with a campaign called Be More Gay. Leading up to the church are signs, be more gay, be more trans. You can read about it online at bemorelove.org. In 1980, Adrienne Rich wrote an essay called Compulsory Heterosexuality and Lesbian Existence. That essay explores the idea that heterosexuality is a patriarchal institution imposed upon women, part of the many ways that society has used to control women over the centuries, millennia, fill in the blank, rather than a natural state of being. The retreat into sameness, Rich writes, the retreat into sameness, assimilation for those who can manage it, is the most passive and debilitating of responses to political repression, economic insecurity, and a renewed open season on difference. A renewed open season on difference. In this moment, in this country, in this congregation, how do we respond to that season? How do we refuse to retreat into sameness? How do we become more gay? How do we work against heteronormativity, against the tepid tolerance that might be the hallmark of an institution that's just okay with having the right kind of LGBTQ people in our space? So a few ideas. Some of you may have noticed in meetings with me that I often begin by inviting folks to introduce themselves with names and, if they would like, with pronouns. And perhaps you are someone who does that in all of your meetings, or perhaps you are someone who has never done that before. Well, that was me only a few years back. Introducing with pronouns allows us to make space for those whose pronouns are not always accurately identified by other people, and therefore by folks who are misgendered. Even though you may guess my pronouns are she, her, hers, and you would be right, I introduce myself with pronouns so that someone else whose pronouns are they, them, has a space to be able to share it, and so that I can then use the right pronouns, because I certainly want to have good manners. Now, if you would like to have a conversation about use of the singular they in grammatical appropriateness, I am not taking that time right now, but please email me. I have many articles to send you. While we're talking about pronouns, of course, that means that we need to have an open and beautiful understanding of gender in all its diversity. Many of us were raised to understand gender as being a binary, right? Male or female. Click box A or box B. And maybe if you're trans, you might switch boxes, but you're still switching box to box, right? But indeed, gender is instead a spectrum. And we might in our own lifetimes move on that spectrum, or even in a day, if we are gender fluid, find ourselves inhabiting gender in different ways. We may be agender or non-binary, gender fluid or gender queer. And those of us who have actually found that one of the boxes works pretty well for us may learn more about gender and how we experience it as we open ourselves to the beautiful spectrum of gender in lived experience. Working against heteronormativity means checking assumptions. It means not assuming someone is straight just because they are partnered with someone of a different gender. It means not assuming relationships between people when you meet them, not assuming a kid has a mother and a father. Working against heteronormativity is about our language, using friends instead of boys and girls, or honored guests instead of ladies and gentlemen, or siblings instead of brothers and sisters. My family went to Disney recently for a 4-day whirlwind tour. And one change we noticed there from several years ago is that they no longer say, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, the line is right here. Instead, they say, my friends, the line is right here. There's still a line. My friends, welcome. C.B. Beale, a Unitarian Universalist who works around the country, talks about the idea of what they call radical preemptive inclusion. Radical preemptive inclusion, Beale says, is the practice of assuming that everyone with every potential identity is always in the room, because indeed, they may be. And so how do we use language to welcome and to include? What I think of as minding our manners, so that everyone knows this is space for them. In our call to worship this morning, Mark Bellatini asked, how do you discuss the truth that some men love men with the children in the church school and the church home? But we, actually, have the opportunity to learn from our children and youth, many of whom are able to put language to their own identities and experience far earlier than prior generations. Partly because that language is accessible to them, that language is identified, yes, that speaks to who I am. And partly because the world out there still says that they are wrong, and that language is an act of resistance. I reached out inviting some folks to share with me some of their recommendations for how this congregation might work against heteronormativity, how we might be a queered church. One of our teens who asked to be identified as a queer teen at UUCA wrote perhaps the most complete response to a request for thoughts I have ever received. People often assume, they wrote, I'm straight, or assume I identify as a cis woman because straight and cis are the default. It makes me uncomfortable, but I don't often correct them if they're strangers or if they're in a position of power relative to me, and especially if they're men, because it can be a safety issue. I wish they hadn't assumed anything about my sexuality or gender identity and had referred to me with inclusive language. This is the part that tugged on my heartstrings, I think. I feel like being UU, this teen wrote, has shaped me to a strong belief in justice and the inherent worth and dignity of all people. And being queer means I've learned to extend that to myself as well. Queerness often becomes a political identity, and I feel like that has led me to a stronger desire for justice for others. I think centering queerness at UUCA, they wrote, would look like including more trans and queer voices of all ages and backgrounds. It means continuing to give an expansive sex education program, shout out to OWL, accommodating disabled queer people, and recognizing that it's okay to make mistakes and correct yourself without being offended at being called out. So we have some suggestions. Those of us who are cisgender and those of us who are straight, those of us too who are queer, knowing every queer experience is not the same. Likely every single one of us in this room knows part of how to make someone else feel welcome and can still yet learn part of how to make someone else welcome. Perhaps welcoming in the end is about learning, about being willing to be open, being willing to be changed ourselves in the process, even to discover new things about our identities, language for our experiences, new understandings of who we are. And certainly, friends, welcoming is about blessing, about the blessing of being in a human family with so many beautiful ways to express gender, so many beautiful ways to experience sexuality, so many beautiful ways to name love. Those are blessings we can receive, all of us. And we can give a blessing, too, in the language we use, in how we understand our institution. I want to close with words from M. Barclay from the online liturgical resource infleshed.com. We used M. Barclay's words at Easter as well. They are the first openly trans minister ordained by the United Methodist Church. And I offer their words today. Every time the word gay rolls off my tongue, when the words queer or intersex or trans or non-binary or bisexual bless my lips, no matter what I'm talking about, I am also always sending a love letter, casting a lifeline, praying a prayer, and yes, obviously waving a flag. So many generations of silence and slurs, of words of violence and of quiet, lonely. Does anyone else in the world feel this way? My heart could burst every time I speak the imperfect but earnest attempts at finding ways to communicate lineages of us. Train a child up in the way they should go, says the scriptures. And I want them all to go queerly, go freely, go in belonging. I want us to raise a whole generation of kids who never learn to hate themselves or to treat others like monsters, or that there's anyone even God is against. This is indeed part of my queer agenda, to expose children as early as possible to all the possibilities of their beautiful blooming. To leave no doubt that whichever way their love blossoms and their gender blooms and their body unfurls, they will be protected, cherished, celebrated, loved. In the world as it is, to even begin to balance out all the messages otherwise, these things cannot be said enough. So we say them in every form they take across languages and cultures. We say them as early and as often as we can. We say them especially when they're not welcome. We say them with all the love we've got, and we will never, never stop. May we too say them with all the love we've got, and may we never, never stop.
I invite you to rise as you're willing and are able and sing 1017 in your teal hymnal, and we'll sing the first two verses.
We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. Hate and greed and jealousy. We are working to be free.
This is a congregation that gives. Each month, we give our offering to a different organization. This month's is going to a group called Alianza's Accompaniment Program. The funds primarily support the international accompaniment program of the Network in Solidarity with the People of Guatemala. That's also called NISGUA, N-I-S-G-U-A. A small portion of the funds that are collected also support a local organization in the Buckingham community. Since 1981, NISGUA has provided accompaniment to organizations and individuals involved in key legal cases seeking justice and accountability for genocide crimes against humanity. The passage of a 2021 so-called NGO law and the continuing criminalization and forced exile of prominent judges and prosecutors threaten the very existence of non-governmental organizations who receive funds from outside the country will run. This creates a special urgency for us to continue to support NISQA while we can. Please watch for more information. There will be a May 19th Zoom event that will share more about the work that NISQA does, the work that you will support with your offering today. Will the ushers please take an offering?
I'd like you to join us in our anthem, and we're going to be singing some words in Swahili, Heya Heya Sisi ni Moja, which means we are one. So your part, can you let me an F, please? Your part is to sing this. We are one. Can we practice that? Ready? We are one. That's it, you've got it. So I'll cue you when it's time.
Will the ushers please bring the offering forward? %70 of the offering taken today will be given to this specific group. 30% remains with the congregation to help us continue to do work in the community. We bless and receive these gifts, opening our hearts to true generosity. Please join me in these words. Let us be grateful when we give, be it time, talent, or treasure, for giving brings us joy. Let us be grateful for our needs and the experience of vulnerability, for they teach us how to receive in community and love. Let us be grateful for those who share their gifts to nurture this congregation, for it is a blessing to make a difference together.
It is indeed a blessing to make a difference. It is a blessing to find a way to widen the welcome. It is a blessing to know ourselves loved as part of the beautiful rainbow family. It is a blessing to find and name queer community, and it is a blessing at UUCA to queer the institution so that we open our arms as wide as they go. May we find and build that blessing now and in years to come.